Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucia and this is Lulu's Leaves. In today's video, I am going to be talking to you guys about a few plants that I don't actually think should be houseplants. Obviously, all of the plants that we keep indoors originally came from outside, and a majority of the ones that do come inside with us during the winter and summer months are ones that have come from either Asia or South America, more tropical locations. So obviously they need some different care requirements than the blue spruce outside. Because these plants come from tropical areas, they often have pretty difficult care requirements. There are a lot of plants though that will adapt to our home situation because they're relatively easy to care for even in the wild. They don't require a lot of rain, they don't require a lot of sunlight, and that makes them good candidates for indoor houseplants. But there are a lot of plants that we have brought into our homes over the past few years or decades even, that don't necessarily belong there, at least in my opinion. So that is what today's video is going to be all about. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe as well. I also have YouTube memberships where you guys can gain access to a Discord group chat. It's a private chat where we talk all day long about houseplants, and I also have some extra content available over there if you join at the top 2 tiers. But yeah, that's a super fun time. If you are interested in joining as a member, don't forget to click the join button or the link down in the description below. I think that's all that I needed to say before we get into today's video though, so yeah, I hope you guys really enjoy it. All right guys, so the first plant that I want to talk to you guys about that I don't think should be an indoor house plant is the Ficus lyrata. This plant is obviously very beautiful, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it if you haven't already kept one in your own home. This was actually one of my first houseplants. I believe that I purchased a Ficus lyrata. It was a bambino though, the ones that stay a little bit smaller. I think I purchased one of those as my first houseplant. I got a snake plant and I got a Ficus lyrata bambino. I can tell you right now, that plant did not last with me very long. I didn't kill it, but I did give it away because I wasn't capable of maintaining whatever that plant needed. So yeah, I then went a while without having one of those plants, and as you guys may have seen in one of my previous videos, when I moved to this apartment, we actually did get a really large Ficus lyrata. I got a really beautiful plant to put in the corner of my room, but unfortunately it did actually come with scale. Scale is a type of houseplant pest that is pretty difficult to get rid of if it is an infestation, and with the Ficus lyrata already being a really sensitive plant, it was really difficult to treat. So I ended up having this plant slowly die in front of me, and while most of the problem may have been that it had scale, I also know that this plant is just really finicky and anything can set it off. I've heard from lots of different people that they've had struggles with Ficus lyratas, at least growing them in their homes. I have heard some success stories of people keeping them outside during the summer and maybe bringing them in over the winter and keeping them in really bright light when they do, but they are not a plant that can be easily kept inside in a lower light situation. They definitely need bright light if you are going to keep them indoors. Obviously, these plants are from, the wild, and they are a tree, so they are going to get pretty big over time. And usually trees are full sun plants because they are taller than all of the plants in the understory, so they get more light. This tree specifically, I don't know that it's really one that gets that tall. It's more so one that gets bushy and branches out, but it also does take a lot of sun to maintain this plant. And again, that's not super conducive to a home that has a roof. For those reasons, I really don't think that the Ficus lyrata is a good houseplant, but if you're able to keep one in your home and it's happy, send me a picture on Instagram. I would love to share that with my followers. If you have any tips, leave them in that message as well. I don't have the key to success with that plant quite yet. And if you do, I would love to hear from you. But yeah, the Ficus lyrata is definitely on my list of plants that should not be houseplants. The next plant is one that you guys may not agree with me on, and that is totally okay. A lot of these plants are going to be a little bit controversial in terms of whether they are good houseplants or not, but in my experience, woody stemmed hoyas do not make great houseplants. This is a different situation than the Ficus lyrata. You can definitely keep a woody stemmed hoya alive in your home. There's no problem with that as long as you are watering it when it's dry and giving it enough sunlight. But these types of hoyas, especially when they are thicker and a little bit older, I find they grow really, really slowly indoors. Growing slowly doesn't make it a no-go for the houseplant territory, but I know that a lot of us really like to watch our plants grow, and with a lot of these woodier hoyas, I've had them for years and I've had zero growth. There are definitely some cases where I put them in lower light spots, and maybe that's why they're not doing so well, but even when I put them in my greenhouse cabinet or right beside a window, I've had some trouble growing these hoyas. Again, it's something that you can definitely keep alive, but what makes houseplants great are watching them grow. So yeah, if you really want a plant that is going to grow quickly in front of your eyes, you're going to be able to watch the progress and feel some sort of reward when that plant grows, woody stemmed hoyas might not be for you unless you have somewhere outdoors to keep them. In Canada, we have really harsh winters, so any plants that we put outside have to be brought inside over the winter. If you're in somewhere like Florida or California, you may not have to do that. So if you want to keep hoyas, I actually suggest maybe keeping them on a porch that's at least covered, but does get a little bit of direct sunlight. A lot of the times that will give you faster growth on these woodier hoyas. And again, I don't want to deter you from these plants because they can survive in your home. They just are not going to grow quickly, and that's the bottom line. Just keep that in mind if you do want to get any woody stemmed hoya or any, older hoya. You may actually want to keep it semi-outdoors. Next up, I want to talk about a plant that I actually absolutely love, and I do keep as an indoor house plant. It does grow really well, but there are a few downsides to keeping it indoors, and I'm sure that it would probably be happier in a tropical climate outdoors than it ever will be in my home. The plant that I'm talking about is the Philodendron gloriosum. Philodendron gloriosum is a gorgeous plant that I absolutely love, but there are some downsides to keeping it indoors. One tricky thing about keeping the gloriosum indoors is that it easily and quickly grows out of its pot. I have a giant gloriosum, and because of that, I am constantly upgrading the pot, and the pot is getting really freaking large. This is less of an issue with smaller gloriosums, but because they do grow really quickly and they grow really large, it is a difficult one to keep in a smaller place. If you have a really large house with great light, you should have a great time growing this plant. But when you're keeping it indoors and in a small apartment like I am, it does take up a ton of space. It is one of my favorite plants, and that's why I'm willing to give it so much space. It is a really, really beautiful plant. But if you're tight on space, this might not be the one for you because they just explode. There is a way around the ever-growing pot size problem and ever-growing plant size problem. You can always propagate the plant when it does reach the end of that pot and maybe share it with your friends, trade it off, sell it, do whatever you would like. But that is a good way to keep your plant small enough and manageable enough to keep it indoors. I also suggest keeping it in a rectangular pot if you can. At this point, with the size of my plant, if I did keep it in a rectangular planter, it would take up my entire plant room, so I do keep it in a smaller pot, and I'm just kind of letting it figure itself out in there for now. I do find sometimes too, if you're not keeping it in bright enough light, which I actually don't like to keep it in bright light because I find the leaves come out darker and nicer in lower light, but if it is in low light, it definitely does reach towards the sun, and sometimes that creates pretty long petioles. And this plant, again, loves to sprawl out. So just keep in mind if you do want to get a Philodendron gloriosum that you are going to be dealing with some space issues eventually if you're not already dealing with them. For me, this is something that I am willing to work with because I love the plant so much. But if you are thinking about it and it's not, at the top of your wish list and you don't have a ton of space, it might not be a great house plant for you. If you have somewhere to keep it outdoors and you live in a tropical climate, definitely do so. I'm sure it would absolutely love living on the surface of your, garden, bed, whatever. I'm sure it would really love living outside. Again, this is an understory plant though, so make sure that if you do keep it outside, it is very much covered by a tree. I'm sure it would love growing directly under a tree even. Next up, I want to talk about a group of plants, and I feel like I'm always talking about these plants in a negative way, and I don't feel great about that because they are very cool, but they do take a little bit of work. I am talking about succulents and cacti even. I really find these are difficult to grow indoors. If you are going to keep succulents indoors, you absolutely need grow lights to maintain proper growth on these plants if you don't want them to grow so tall and towards the light. And if you don't have grow lights, they absolutely need to be on your windowsill. There is an exception to that. I think that haworthias do really well in low light. There are a few others that I maybe don't know about that do well in low light, but for the most part, succulents are from the desert. And desert dwelling plants get a ton of sun, not obstructed by trees, and they don't get a lot of water either. So you do need to be sure that you're not overwatering these plants and that you're giving them sufficient lighting. They don't make a great indoor plant because of that. If you go to different garden centers, a lot of the times you're gonna find succulents in the outdoor plant area. The reason for that is because they are really meant to be full sun plants. And some people can get full sun on their windowsill in a south-facing window, but most of us don't have that luxury. So they are usually an outdoor plant in my experience, and that's why I don't like to keep them so much as indoor house plants. I definitely have a few here and there, but none of them are thriving because they really should be outdoors, in my opinion. That's really all I have to say about succulents. Again, they're just not the best house plants, and I really don't feel like I will be getting any more of them unless I keep them outdoors, but yeah, I just don't suggest them for beginners at least. If you have grow lights and you can maintain them in your house, that's fantastic, but they are definitely not house plants for me. Next up, I want to talk about a plant that I know most people struggle with. I definitely think that there are some cases that you can keep this plant indoors, but for the most part, I feel like it's probably going to do best in its natural habitat, like many other plants. The plant that I'm talking about is the Anthurium warocqueanum. This is a beautiful plant, and I know that a lot of people really wanted this plant at least last year or the year before. This plant was on everyone's wish list. Now it's a little bit less popular because a lot of people already have it if they've wanted it. Anthuriums in general have honestly just gone down in popularity over the last few years, or sorry, not last few years, but the last year. But this one specifically gives a ton of people a lot of trouble. I find if you're going to keep an Anthurium warocqueanum, you do have to keep it in a greenhouse setting. Sometimes you can display these plants really beautifully in a greenhouse setting, like in an IKEA greenhouse cabinet. If you DIY the background, make it look super beautiful in there and have really high humidity. I mean, obviously you don't have to DIY the background, but I'm just saying, sometimes you can display these plants really beautifully. But for the most part, if you're keeping it in a greenhouse, you're not going to be able to enjoy it the same way you would some of your other houseplants that, we just keep on our shelves. For me, that's really important. I do want to be able to watch my houseplants grow, and I don't love plants, at least these days, that have to be kept in such high humidity that I can't enjoy them properly. And I think that this plant is one of those plants that needs really great humidity, at least for a while, until you can acclimate it to your home. And even then, it doesn't do the best. Most people have browning at the edges of the leaves. It's a really common thing with any Anthurium, really, especially if you aren't on top of your watering schedule, you're going to have browning on your Anthurium leaves, especially the Anthurium warocqueanum. I don't think this makes a great houseplant because it's one that is not easily enjoyed unless it's in a greenhouse, and that's where I'm at with that one. There's not much more to say. Well guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about some houseplants that I don't really think make great houseplants. If you disagree with me, leave a comment down below. I would love to have a little discussion about why you disagree. Again, no offense taken. I know that a lot of people can take care of these plants really well in captivity, but It's not something that I can manage. So yeah, give some tips down below for those of you who have these plants, for those who maybe want these plants. But that's going to be all from me. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below. Give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you didn't agree with me, and join as a member if you are interested. That is all. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!